Let's do this. Click. And we're live. It is Saturday, December 12th, 2020, 5 o'clock p.m., and I have begun the task of satisfying Room Raider. Room Raider wants a pineapple. Here's a pineapple, Room Raider. Room Raider wants an extra element other than the cannons, the undersized, I forget what, insufficiently sized cannons.
Insufficient size, yes.
I got him a battle axe, or her. And I have ordered lights for under the cannons. I have also ordered Civil War era cannonballs, as the audience has requested. And I was thinking maybe in the plant department of a Venus flytrap or some flesh-eating plant, although I think it's a little too cold in this room for that. We have the Bob Mueller puppet, the battle axe. One problem with this setup, by the way, is that the burying the battle axe in the pineapple does cause the pineapple to drip pineapple juice. And so in this area, we have a little gathering pool of pineapple juice. I'm hoping that flood will be contained.
I'm just imagining this is going to be your moment for the fruit flies. That's what's going to happen.
I am gonna, as I was talking about today with a viewer, before that happens, I'm going to, let's make a little face for Room Raider.
Oh, perfect.
All right.
Great.
Now that, but I am going to encase the pineapple in epoxy resin as soon as I can make a mold for it. We're not allowed to have fun anymore. But in lieu of fun, we have the ability both to kowtow to and make fun of Room Raider, which is fun. Or at least in lieu of fun. And it's just us today. I suggest we go easy on the planning the show part of the show because we have a bunch of requests out to people from last time we did it, and I have just renewed a bunch of invitations. So is there much to discuss in the way of do we have any of the show planned for this week?
Let me look at the calendar. No.
And who's our mystery guest for tomorrow?
Wouldn't you like to know? So I have a couple of orders of business. One is that I was thinking that we've done an insufficient job kind of celebrating or talking about the fact that the vaccines are starting to get distributed in the Western world, and that they're going to start shipping in the U.S. very, very. I think they already have started shipping. So. And the reason I bring this up is because, as I was telling you, I started I was in search of new TV. Also, by the way, I made a literal list from people giving me recommendations on Twitter for TV to watch. And there have been some really great shows that I have watched. Have you seen Ted Lasso?
No.
Oh my gosh. It's actually very good and kind of strangely renews your faith in humanity in this not schmaltzy way. I would highly recommend. It's just a comedy about a guy.
I've been watching a show that really undermines your faith in humanity.
What have you been watching? The news?
What's that? No, I've been watching a documentary series called The Vow about Nexium.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And I know horrifying.
Yeah. I can't do that stuff. So I've been watching Ted Lasso was unbelievable. I've watched The Bridge, which was a movie about these crazy serial killers in Finland and Sweden. Or no, not Finland, Sweden. Netherlands and Sweden. And then I don't know, I've been watching all these shows, but we started watching Utopia because it was recommended to us. And I started watching this, and I was like, it's got John Cusack in it and Rainn Wilson from The Office. And this insanely diverse cast, and it's on Amazon. And I was like, oh, what's this about? It's like based on kind of a graphic novel. Maybe this will be good. And it's incredibly violent. And it turns out the entire movie is about an insane conspiracy theory being correct that spoiler alert here, that it's all about vaccines and a rogue flu virus that is causing a global pandemic, except the conspiracy, Ben, you have to kind of get this. The conspiracy is like a Malthusian conspiracy to this is really going to be spoilers, is basically like not to basically stare that the vaccine, once they create a false pandemic, like there's no actual pandemic, they create a false pandemic, and then they create this vaccine that sterilizes people.
Ugh.
Right? And I'm like, this, and like those are the good guys. The good guys are the ones who like uncover this vaccine conspiracy to sterilize people and smash all of the vaccine before it gets shipped to people. And the bad guy is the FDA and like this giant pharmaceutical company that is like behind all of this. And it's like, I think that The Verge called it the most poorly timed television show to ever like air, because it all was filmed before the pandemic. So it was all filmed in 2019, and it just is coming to like the thing. And like there's almost like a reason that it hasn't even become like an underground, oh my God, this is so bad, can you believe how bad this is? Because I swear to God, if people actually started watching it, it could like spark an entire kind of like, I feel like it would just end up becoming like a we told you so for like conspiracy nut jobs. Anyway, so that being said, let's talk about, do you have like, have you been following the news in the vaccine at all? Or like anything that's rolling out?
Well, I've been following the news insofar as in a moderate sort of way. It looks like we're going to get distribution starting Monday. I think it would be great to have a guest this week on vaccine delivery. Right?
I was thinking that too.
The logistics of, if we take Juliette Kayyem's point seriously,
she was awesome.
We're past the point of medicine and into the point of logistics. Who are the people who know about how to get a needle into the arm of every person in the world?
Yeah.
Like that's a really interesting problem. It's got a medical dimension, but it's fundamentally not just a medical problem. It's a logistics problem. Who is so if people, yes, and Michael E. is correct, it's actually 2 needles separated by 3 weeks. So you don't just have to get people to show up. You gotta get them to show up twice, or the first one's kind of useless. So if people in the audience have good ideas about like who is, I mean, part of this is like the organization that really knows how to do this kind of thing is the military. But we're not going to deploy the military for this. Yes, Kathy Ramsey, Bill Gates has been trying to do exactly this with malaria.
I was just going to say, the man has basically wiped out malaria between nets and vaccines.
Well, there's still a lot of malaria. It's still the leading killer, I think the world's leading infectious disease killer, at least until this year. I don't know if COVID has passed it, but it kills a lot more people in Africa than AIDS does.
That's been true for a while.
Yes, right. Through all the attention to HIV, the biggest killer was malaria. I mean, they're just like the development. You know, actually speaking of that, you know, a lot of the drug cocktail that initially treated HIV, one of the main vectors for people not being able to get treatment to prevent AIDS was because all of
a lot of those medicines required refrigeration, and people couldn't reliably have refrigeration in certain places so that they could continue to. So, anyways, the development of like non-refrigerated medicines in like I think it was like the early 2000s, totally changed that. Sorry, that's just like a. I was just thinking the getting over the hurdle of a refrigeration condition as like a logistical hurdle. It's like a huge hurdle, is I guess what I'm trying to say. It just it's going to be a weird. It's going to be a weird. It's also interesting to me that they contracted with private companies, UPS and FedEx. Do you think that that's interesting or not? Or maybe
do.
I'm like not.
I mean,
I was actually
think,
why isn't USPS doing this or
I
the
think
military?
I think the whole logistics of it is really interesting, and like I would love, like I don't know this field at all, but like if somebody could, did anybody did you listen to the Radiolab episode about the guy who developed the mumps vaccine?
Yes, but I don't remember it very well. But I do vaguely remember that.
So this
episode.
is a guy who I'd never heard of, named Hilliman, who grew up in rural Montana and is, according to this episode anyway, probably responsible for he created 40 separate vaccines and is probably responsible for saving more lives than any other person in history. I thought it was just a fascinating thing, but interestingly, it was all about the development of vaccines, not about like how you actually get them to every corner of the world and inject them into or cause people to eat them, as in the polio vaccine. Actually get them in people's arms. And I think so let's both spend a little time this week on really good logisticians. And
I mean, I'd literally be interested in anyone who does. I would be interested in hearing how frozen peas like go through like a logistics system. I feel like that would be telling, like almost like that. You know what I mean? Like I just have no idea. I have no idea. That and supply chains generally. Do you remember this when there was not food? Well, it wasn't like technical food shortages, but remember when like there was no toilet paper and there was like it would be like hard to get carrots or like whatever it was, like just randomly at certain grocery stores because people bought stuff up and panicked and like the supply chains were disrupted. But then the commercial supply chains were like flooded with food. Do you remember this? Like people that get supplied by like restaurant supply chains and catering supply chains, people that make prepared food. And that they're two totally separate supply chains between grocery stores and like that supply commercial like vegetable goods or meat goods or whatever. And there was a decoupling of like those, like so that they were like kind of, you would find like the people. I remember on Instagram people having pictures of absolutely giant carrots because like if you have a carrot that big, you just give it to a carrot processing place like that makes shredded carrots. You don't put it in a bag of carrots to give to consumers. And I'm kind of wondering what happened with all of that, if that ever kind of is going to like, if we learned anything, if there's like backup systems that have developed in place. I don't know. Does that make any sense? I just think that that's kind of an interesting question.
I think it's a very interesting question. So for everybody who has been asking for Asha Rangappa to come on the show, she has just agreed.
Okay.
And so that will happen this week. And I have pinged Andy Slavitt to see if he's game to talk about vaccine logistics, including who else would be a good person to talk to about vaccine logistics. So you should all retweet that request.
Tony Cava sent me on behalf of kind of the discourse group a list of people to have on, but because we're not kind of doing formal guest stuff and we have such a backlog, I think that we'll hold on to it. But I do see it. So like, I'll run some of these names back and forth with Ben separately, Tony, and thank you everyone for sending these along. These are really great. Some of these we can definitely make happen. What was I gonna
All
say?
right.
Yeah. Can we get you a wax pineapple? I feel like we could get a wax pineapple.
I feel like fake pineapples are, I mean, if I'm going to embed a battle axe in a pineapple, I want it dripping with blood.
Okay,
Or
so you're just going to eat a lot of
juice.
pineapple.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Or
like,
just like...
I'm going to let it shrivel up and start to rot. And then we're going to see what happens. You're the one with a leg of lamb in your basement, just hanging there.
But that's like that was like I followed expressed instructions to keep it preserved, and so it wasn't dripping like anything. In fact, dripping would have been a bad sign. So like really bad sign.
All right. I think Asha is confirmed for Monday, although let's give her a moment to respond on that. All right. Should we... yes, Richard Wattenberger, this is a Lizzie Borden kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think the whole... world of pineapples as decoration. Who actually decorates their house with pineapples except to satisfy Room Rater?
Don't be mean. There are people who are basic and really like pineapples, or like like they're a whimsical fruit. They're kind of like weird looking.
Okay, I understand, but
they're
looking
regal.
back of you, Kate. Looking back of you, you have a plant.
Yeah.
Do you have a decorative pineapple?
No. I have a decorative fish.
Yeah, you have a dead fish. I'm just saying, like...
I know, I don't...
Like, people don't actually, like, real people don't actually decorate their houses with pineapples, because they rot.
Oh, with actual pineapples. That's true, yes. But, like, I mean, like, decorative pineapples, people definitely have them in their house. That's, like, a thing that people have. It's like a big, like, it's a thing. Yeah, people are saying it's a symbol of welcome. Yeah, it's like a thing. Like, I don't know. I think that it's like a whole, it's a design motif, I think.
I decorate my house with cannons.
I don't know if cannons are a welcoming symbol.
I'm with Petra on this. I eat them and purchase a new one. That's where I go with this. All right. Let's okay. Asha is confirmed for Monday. I'm going to write her in on the calendar. And I think we should go with like audience comments and questions now, because like planning is just not what I'm in the mood for right now.
I don't want to plan. I'm like
yeah.
I have been making like an obscene number of Christmas cookies and kind of feeling really stressed that it's almost the end of the year and I have to go back to teaching again. It's kind of like terrifying.
Yeah, that's right, because you've been off.
Yeah. There's, I haven't been off. I've still done a lot of stuff and been writing and doing other things. But yeah, I've been
So what are you teaching this coming semester?
I'm teaching property, internet law, and information privacy. So I have a huge semester, and it's remote for 2 of the classes and in person for 1. And so I'm actually quite nervous about the in-person teaching, not because of my law school. I'm actually like, there were no cases of COVID that were transmitted on campus, and there were only 6 in the whole law school. But I have to take like 3 modes of public transit to get to work. And I'm worried about that in New York City right now. Is that like crazy, or should I, like, I don't know. And so, I don't know. It's also just kind of crazy to just I have to start thinking about teaching behind a plexiglass glass screen and teaching with masks on and figuring out how to like take questions when I'm teaching across two rooms. Like I'm teaching live in one room, and then next door there's a room.
I think you should wear.
Getting
I think you should wear a full body hazmat suit.
That's cool.
And
I'll
I think
just blend in.
I think you should like ride the public transportation in it. Wear a complete gas mask. Whoa. I think that's what we should do. We should and we should film it and make a documentary about it.
Okay, that seems. You're really into like a documentaries. Scott Shapiro is like been texting me nonstop about his new podcast idea, which he's so excited about.
Yes. It doesn't seem to be so much as an idea as a desire to be on a list.
It's really cute though. I think he's going to end up basically like, it's kind of going to be like Borat, but like not as much of an asshole. Like he's just going to be like, he's going to have people on ostensibly to interview them, I think, about like, why do you think I'm not on a list? And then like go into like what they actually do for a living, and everything else. And I think that it's going to be, he's great at committing to kind of the joke. And so I think it'll be like very clever.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
well, it's going to be great. All right. Let's bring in the audience. Richard, the floor is yours.
Hello. So, just a minute. The dogs are going crazy. The mailman just got here. You can hear me over the dogs, though.
Yes.
Well, like I said, I'm a simple man, and so things like nominating Andrew Cuomo as AG like really go over my head. What's going on here?
I forgot that happened.
The New York Times was reporting this. Is this just something that the transition is throwing out to them, or is this something you even take seriously?
So the transition has not thrown out trial balloons that are complete vapor on. So I think if they're leaking to the New York Times that, or if Cuomo's people, so the one possibility, of course, is that it's not coming from them, it's coming from Cuomo, or that it's coming from one of the other possible nominees. That they kind of know who the other candidates are to some degree. So I would say it's less than vapor. But remember, 36 hours ago, we were all getting ready for a Doug Jones nomination. And so it's clearly still very much in flux. I gotta say, it seems like a genuinely bad idea to me, not because I have anything against Andrew Cuomo, which I don't, but number one, I do think that naming a politician to that position is a bad idea for a lot of reasons, but not least of which is if you're trying to depoliticize the perception of the Justice Department, one way to undermine that is to appoint a politician to it. There have been politicians who've done very good jobs as Attorney General, so I don't want to overstate the impossibility of it, but it's not ideal. And I do think the model of the professional Justice Department career staff type, like the Lisa Monaco's or Jay Johnson's and Jay has of course been a principal as well at Homeland Security, is a better model here. That said, the other reason in Cuomo's case that it might be a bad idea, and honestly the reason I think it will not happen, is that somebody at the transition is going to suck in their gut and say, what does a confirmation hearing look like? And the idea of and Cuomo's errors in the early days of the pandemic when he really made some grievous mistakes. And I think they're forgivable because we all, because nobody knew what they were doing. But they did cost a lot of lives. And, he did cause people to be, COVID patients to be housed in beds in long-term care facilities, and that really caused a problem in New York. And so I do think the likelihood that they will suck in their breath and say this actually is not what we want a confirmation hearing to be about may make it an idea that has a short life. That said, look, he's a very talented guy. He's a very articulate guy. And he's somebody who has increased his approval rating substantially over the course of his leadership during this period. And so that is always something, as you're trying to staff up a COVID response administration, that's something that is meaningful. I continue to think that the best choice for this job is Merrick Garland. The second best choices in rough tie are Jay Johnson and Lisa Monaco. And what all three of those people have in common is very, very deep experience with the Department of Justice, and that is something that Andrew Cuomo does not have. And I don't think there is a substitute for that.
I mean, I saw Quinta's tweet about this, and was like, and her, well, maybe it was actually the New York Times characterization of Cuomo, and she was disputing his characterization as kind of like his who has been lauded for his like quick response to COVID. And I think what you said is just right, like about the narrative that's around him. I just don't see him. Maybe it's because of his father, but I've always just seen him staying to a certain level, at least staying on like the New York stage. But maybe this will be his moment.
Well, maybe
Mario
secretary.
had his moment.
He was a cabinet secretary, right?
I forgot it. I totally forgot.
And he's a very able guy. He's very smart. I don't think the technical capabilities of being AG are especially onerous. It's not like, it's not a job where you need very deep knowledge of a certain area. What you need is a reputation for total integrity, and you need to know how to supervise lawyers. Yeah. I don't think he's ever been in a supervising lots of lawyers, running investigations kind of job. Could he do it with a really fine deputy AG? And people should understand, in fact, the deputy attorney general runs the Justice Department. The attorney general does not. Yeah. So sure, he could do it. He could do a good job, just as a lot of other people could do a good job. Is he the ideal person to do it? Certainly not. And I do think that the optics of his early performance in COVID would not be great from a, if you're, the Democrats want to be on offense about COVID, right? And a confirmation hearing with Cuomo, they would be on defense.
Yeah. What it reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of when like Elena Kagan was appointed to Solicitor General. It was like a job. She was like just like an insanely well qualified person. She'd done tons of stuff. Like it wasn't, but she'd never argued a case before the court before she took the Solicitor General like role. And like I kind of feel, there would have been better people to make oral argument, but like she was,
although she was excellent.
I know she ended up being excellent. That's kind of but people didn't predict her being excellent. People didn't know.
I don't know. I think there has always been with regard to positions like AG, whoops, we just have a sudden visitor. There's always been a dean of Yale and Harvard Law School exception. So if you think
That's
about
a good point.
if you think about Robert Bork,
Yeah.
who goes from being the dean of the Yale Law School to, people forget this about Bork because he's such a right winger, but he was the dean of the Yale Law School, right?
Yep.
And he
Yep.
goes from that to being
No,
SJ.
it's a great point. It's a great point.
And nobody questioned his qualifications to do that. And I do think Elena was a little bit like that. She was like, okay, she's the dean of the Harvard Law School. Everybody knows she's a towering figure. She's also somewhat underpublished. She actually didn't have that much scholarship.
Yeah, and she hadn't done any appellate, like she hadn't
Right.
done like appellate like arguments. Like
But-
she
but
just like
no-
literally it was like a
But
different
nobody
skill.
who knew her thought like she wouldn't
I
be
know.
able to be SJ, right? She was like, and I do think there's a bit of that, like you don't get chosen for a position like that unless you're, and just like, if John Manning were named SG, and of course he wouldn't be because he's a conservative of sorts, nobody would say anything other than, wow, what a great roundly qualified choice, even though I don't think Manning's ever argued anything, at least
No.
not that I know of.
So maybe you're right. Maybe there was like so maybe it's a totally different thing. It strikes me as like Elena Justice Kagan has always been beloved, thought of as brilliant. People liked her, but I do remember people saying with like a marked kind of like, well, like who knows how this is going to go with the solicitor general thing. She ended up shining and being great. But I was just for whatever reason, the way you were talking about Cuomo reminded me of kind of that moment, and so I just kind of like thought it was worth pointing out.
He could be great, he could do it really well, and it's not like any of these people could be great. Like Sally Yates, I don't think I would not choose her. Could
Would
she
you
be
pick
great?
her over Jeff Sessions?
Well, of course.
I know.
And as George Paulus points out in the chat, Ed Levy, who was really the greatest attorney general of the century, had no DOJ experience and just came out of running the University of Chicago. And so like people are, you don't really know what you're getting. And I would never say, Cuomo couldn't do the job. He's not who I would pick. All right, Esther.
Yes, Esther,
the
hello.
floor is yours.
I'm here, but I'm walking away from my computer for 1 second.
Well,
but I can hear
and
you,
Esther's,
Esther.
I cannot turn on Esther's camera, so we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Oh, that's really strange.
It's okay. We have you as a disembodied voice.
So I was suggesting a format change occasionally, because when people ask questions and they're answered, it often raises other questions in my mind that then are not addressed. So I wondered about the possibility of sort of a guest question. So you set up a poll with a few questions and the audience votes on one, and that is then used for one episode, and you could still have a guest expert. It's just the discussion would not be quite as broad as usual, and give us a chance to maybe delve in more depth into a narrower issue.
So I like this idea a lot, with one caveat, which is that it relies on me to have the imagination to come up with the substance of the poll, which is more imagination than I sometimes have. But if we wanted to do it, what I would suggest is that people suggest things in the chat, and then we could go from the chat to the poll substance, and that way I would be more transcriber of ideas than generator of them.
I like that idea. I mean, I think that it's good to also kind of like we've experimented with format a lot in the show, and like I think that's how we've kind of arrived at like the things we've arrived at. There's a bunch of things we threw out, like tons of ideas we've like run that we so like I'm happy to try something new.
Yeah. So so Tomas is suggesting that I would be Attorney General. There is a little problem with that idea, which is the word attorney.
Yeah.
Can
you sit for the bar exam? Like, does
I think
DC
I could take.
let you?
DC doesn't. California. I could take the California bar.
You would be so fucked when it came to property and like basic
Yeah,
contracts,
right.
like stuff. Like you would just like you're like an excellent constitutional lawyer, and like the ins and outs and the idiosyncrasies of all of the systems of DC.
The next Attorney General should feel free to call me anytime. That's the like half of the people who are being considered are people I know pretty well. If they want my advice on things, they can give me a call. All right, Tony Cava, the floor is yours.
Hello, and Kate, thanks for getting those guest suggestions, and we just kind of try to amalgamate them, is that the right word, and then shoot them over to you.
No, it's super
every
helpful.
few weeks. And if you need to sit on them for a while, no problem. What we're trying to do is minimize the amount of friction and work you guys have to do.
You guys are the best. Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's actually perfect. Also, I really appreciate the descriptions with the people, because there was like as you maybe noted, there was a bunch of people in the last Less Than Ben, and I were like, we don't know who that person is.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The suggesters do that because I don't know who most of them are either.
Yeah.
So, anywho, my question is about yesterday's Supreme Court decision. I don't know what to call it. I've mentioned I'm not
it's
a
an
lawyer.
Order.
Certainly. Yeah, an order.
It's not a decision.
I'm not a lawyer, and an order.
Yeah.
And I'm not a lawyer nor a Supreme Court expert. But it struck me that it was kind of, in a way, kind of the worst of all possible worlds, because without an explanation, it kind of just gave Trump the room he needed to just keep on keeping on with his whole shtick and the grift. And I'm just wondering if maybe the court owed the country an explanation of what it meant. And I'm also wondering if perhaps Thomas's and Alito's dissent, or whatever you want to call it, was overly pedantic and unnecessary. I'm wondering if that was calculated on their part, or if they just couldn't help themselves. But it just kind of struck me as unnecessary.
No, actually, I want to defend Thomas and Alito on this. So Thomas and Alito have a position of principle, the background of which is not political in character. I mean, the least political body of cases that the Supreme Court deals with are suits between states, which generally don't implicate any of the hot button issues that divide liberals and conservatives. Their view is that the Supreme Court, having original jurisdiction over these cases, has no choice but to hear them, in exactly the way that if you sue me in federal court, that's the court of original jurisdiction. It doesn't get to say we just don't care. So the other justices all disagree with this and believe that it is a discretionary matter, that they're the only court with jurisdiction over the suits between the states, but they get to decide whether to hear a case or not. So here you have a completely frivolous dispute between states. You have two justices who believe that the court has a constitutional obligation / duty to hear it. 7 who believe they don't. So I don't think anybody, knowing their view from Texas v. California, where they articulated this very clearly in a totally different context, thought that they would not vote to hear the case. It's once you've articulated that as your view in principle, you can't say then, except when the case is really stupid, right? It's a jurisdictional point. So I thought they were very appropriate, actually. What they said, they didn't want to give Trump any cover. So what they said was, I mean, it's Alito, and Thomas signed it. He said, I don't have the sentence in front of me, but it basically says, I believe we have to hear this case. And so I would vote to grant, I would grant the motion for, for review, but I wouldn't grant any other relief, and I express no opinion on any other issue. So what he's saying here is, I reserve my position on this other issue, this tectonic issue of whether we have to hear cases between states. I'm not backing off my view of that. So I can't join the 7 who says, just go fuck yourself. We're not even considering this bullshit. But I don't disagree with them. And, I wouldn't grant any relief, which is to say, I would let this case get just far enough to say you lose.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a fine way for them to handle it.
Do you remember when I said I think it was yesterday or maybe it was the day before, Tony, that like the way that the court could decide this was by getting rid of it on standing or kind of procedural grounds and not reaching kind of the merits of the case. Like there's a number of cases, there's a lot of law that tries to get to there's a lot of cases, especially environmental cases, that try to get into the court, that people try to bring, and through various types of procedure and jurisdiction, and the court kind of smacks them down because they're like, you're not even supposed to be here. So standing issues and jurisdictional issues have a weird back history in the last couple of years of kind of people who do impact litigation trying to make a difference through the courts by using standing by getting standing in a case and then kind of winning on the merits. This is kind of, to a certain extent, this is a little bit similar. And so where the case, so a number of people on Twitter were saying yesterday, if you're super dorky about it, they were like, oh, I never thought I'd agree with this type of standing decision from SCOTUS. And that was kind of a little bit what they were talking about, which is that they're used to rooting for things having standing because it aligns with their motives, and it's usually coming from a place of people doing social justice impact litigation type of stuff. And so this was, but this was a case that kind of was no, you don't have, you shouldn't be here. This is not where you belong. Right. So that does that make sense?
It does. I guess my comment and my question, and it's maybe it's unfair to put to you because you can't put yourself in someone else's skin, and I understand how lawyers or people who are very versed in the law would understand what they meant in that short memo. It was fairly clear to me as a non-lawyer. But I'm just wondering if that for a very large swath of the electorate, that it was just unclear what Alito even meant by that sentence.
Well, particularly by the last phrase of the sentence, and I express no opinion on any other issue. It's not clear at all what that refers to. But look, these are people who are working under incredible time pressure. Yeah. Remember, the reply briefs had only been filed, some of them had been filed as late as that morning. They're trying to dispose of this case in a clear, decisive, and reasonably principled fashion, really fast, right? And I do think you have to be a little bit forgiving of stuff that is, you would really scratch your head about if it came out right at the end of the term, and they'd had 6 months to work on it. But I do think when the court is acting in its capacity as real-time firemen or a firewoman, we got to be a little bit forgiving when they get the big picture right, and everybody does what you would hope, given their particular ideological point of view, they would do. And we can quibble about words, but I don't have a problem with what Alito and Thomas did yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the alacrity that they acted on, and it didn't take weeks and weeks. And I appreciate you guys hashing this out with me. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
I mean, it's good questions. It makes me think about it. Also, you know what, Ben? Like, thank you for like saying that you don't have a problem with the Alito Thomas. That is a hello.
Good liquor wall.
I know. I think
Hello.
that was actually a liquor store.
I know, right?
Are you in a liquor store?
I am. It's my
That's kind of
Sweet.
awesome.
yeah, it's my part-time
High
job
Kings
right now.
bucket.
Yeah.
Very
Good.
cool.
Hello, can you hear me?
Well served. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can hear me? Awesome, guys. Sorry. Yeah, it was funny. I saw, Ben, that you had put me up to like be in line, and then two guys came in, and I just had the beautifully nice mentality of, why are you here? But I luckily just left. I was just throwing out, I'm a big political junkie, and so that's how you guys came into to my recommendations on YouTube. But what I was mainly going to ask, or what I threw out there, was Nancy Pelosi. Her first, her 2 terms, or 2-year terms, excuse me, her first 4 2-year terms are all different presidents, which is very, Ben, you, Kate as well, probably, you guys know American history deep, much more so maybe than I do. I have a decent gist of it for the last 60, 70 years maybe, but I think that's I don't know, probably a bit of a testament to the shrewd politician she is, and I don't know, the history she can make. I'm not sure. I just was wondering your thoughts, and you guys should also do before the end of the year a top 10 in Lieu moments. The bow tie off this past weekend or week has to be up there, man.
It is
totally
the first competitive sporting event. I want to say Tomas was the first head of state or former head of state to endorse my fight with Putin. So I think it is only appropriate that I would provide him a forum for his challenge to somebody with a bow tie. For a bow tie tying competition, I only wish it had worked out a little better for him. But
yeah, that guy killed him, whatever his name was.
Yeah, Nicholson.
That was insane.
Nicholson is our reigning bow tie tying champion. But so let's refine your question about Pelosi. What is it specifically that you want us to address about her?
Well, it was just more of a comment. Like, isn't that pretty incredible and strange with, obviously, like, she came during the 06, blue wave then when the Senate and the House came back to her, and then she stayed on, obviously, with Obama's wave in 08. She's able to, from what we know, she had a pretty decent, spot at leading, their comeback in 2018. And I know someone in the comments, but she hasn't technically been voted yet, but she said when she became speaker 2 years ago again that she would leave after 2022. So I think that's pretty credible. I mean, it's a pretty interesting, Mitch McConnell in a way has done something similar, but it's only 3 presidents even with him. It's just the randomness is pretty interesting, I think.
Nancy Pelosi is an immensely talented...
And I'm not like the 100% Pelosi fan. I'm just saying it's just interesting, I think.
No, I actually think the comparison to Mitch McConnell is an interesting one. So these are immensely talented legislative tacticians who are, you can, whatever one thinks of their ideologies, of what they're trying to do, she has a unruly caucus to hold together that ranges from everywhere. For the amount of ground it covers, philosophically is really broad. From people like AOC and Ayanna Pressley, who are, hardcore lefties and, affirmatively identify as such, to people in, people focus on Connor Lamb because he's been sparring with but he is not the most conservative member of the Democratic caucus. There are people in that caucus who are in razor-thin Democratic districts and are, relatively rural. And that is a tough thing to hold together. She's managed to do it with a fair amount of discipline. The caucus has been pretty disciplined, despite the fact that they criticize each other and spar a fair bit. And like McConnell, she does it without being that much of a public presence herself. She is charismaless. She is very seldom kind of out there, you know. She raises a whole boatload of money, so she's very good in private settings, but she's not someone, you don't see her at rallies, you don't see her, like, very few people perceive themselves as voting for Nancy Pelosi. And that is a real skill set.
And big what ifs of, or sorry.
No, and that's, and,
No, I was
and
just
I
gonna say,
think it's really impressive.
yeah, like the what if would healthcare reform had passed if she wasn't the speaker, if she didn't have those talents, you know, think of all the times Boehner needed her, you know what I mean? Like, to even just keep the government open. I mean, like, and then, you know, I know it's seemingly easier, but look at what she did with Trump in that meeting. Remember January 19, and, you know, he took the bait. You know, she's got some wins, you know.
So
Yes.
I have to say, like, I think she does go out there and kind of, like, I think she leads through her brand and through kind of her own, everything from, like, the white suits to kind of her, like, clapping to, like, her sitting down to, like, kind of her strategic eye rolls. She keeps it buttoned up, but she makes it so that, like, people really want and need her leadership and her endorsement, and that, like, kind of, like, shrewd is, like, not even a good enough word. It's very, 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 very smart and political.
So
it's, like,
I agree
deeply, yeah.
I agree with that. I think she's extremely talented, and she's a very good leader. But if you ask 100 Americans to pick her out of a lineup, you know, I doubt they could do it. You know, she's not.
Oh,
you know,
really? I think that people on the right, like, have, like, think she's like an HRC. Like I just think that there's, like, so much stuff that people hate her.
There's some of that, but I think there's a lot of people for whom she is part of the Washington background wallpaper.
Yeah, maybe.
And by the way, that's true of Mitch McConnell too.
I was going to say, if that's true of Nancy Pelosi, you have to say that's true of Mitch McConnell.
No, I think they're very similar.
But
they have very similar leadership styles.
Yeah, but there's also would you have said the same thing about, like, Newt Gingrich?
No, Newt Gingrich was
what
a celebrity.
Right, that's what I'm trying. So that's, like, the difference. Is, like, okay, so, like, I see what you're saying, but do you think that, like, people? I would say more people know both McConnell and Pelosi at this point by sheer staying power, which I think is partly what Puckett. Sorry to refer to you by your last name, but I forgot your first name because James. Sorry, I was like Kirby Puckett. No, that was like. But James Puckett was saying, it was just kind of, I think that, like, there's something about her staying power over all the years. And McConnell's that just, like, has, like, the accretion of it is like, oh, some kid thinks that, like, the Speaker of the House is Nancy Pelosi.
Has always
been Nancy Pelosi, because for, like, the 14 years of their existence, it's always been Nancy Pelosi.
Look, it's a leadership style I admire very much. I think it's, and for her to be content with both Adam Schiff and AOC being way more prominent than she is a kind of neat thing. And I think it's been very effective for the Democrats in the House. Nick Berger.
Hi, Nick. It's good to see you
Hello.
again.
Yeah, thank you for bringing me back on again. My question is, with this lawsuit, the Texas lawsuit against the election here, all these state attorney generals that have joined onto it, is there anything that the bars can do to discipline them? Because it almost seems like you have a bunch of doctors and nurses telling people to take poison and they die. The professional licensing boards would look into that, but I mean, it seems like they're doing the same thing to the Constitution with this completely frivolous lawsuit.
No, is the short answer. like, they're just not. Sorry,
It's the
Ben,
wrong
you can
address.
go ahead. But
No. Go ahead to explain why.
So, like I think I said this the other day on the show, but I'm happy to go into it more. Like, they're like bars are governed or each state has its own bar. They all have their own rules and they all have their own ethics and like kind of misconduct committees and their own standards. And for most of history, there is like, and this is also true, frankly, of medical boards. By the way, like medical boards don't like take away people's like license to practice medicine unless there's some bright line rule, like you used your prescription pad to like deal, like these are like certain things like you'll just almost certainly be like lose your license for, like you use your prescription pad to like write fraudulent prescriptions to people that you like knew or like were friends with yours or like family members, like things
or loaning
like that.
it out.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, loaning it out. The same is true of like kind of lawyers, frankly. So like Ben, like basically like if you ever intermingle if you ever take and intermingle any funds from like when you're doing like a house closing, like I take your like $60,000 for your down payment or whatever, and I put
Borrow
it in.
it.
Yeah, and then like if I ever
Don't
touch
do that.
don't like, and I'm like, oh, I just need $20,000. I'll put it all back. And hey, maybe you do put it all back. Doesn't fucking matter. Like that is like you will be disbarred for that. And like there like so those types of bright line rules. But generally speaking, there is such, what people don't understand is like lawyering is so much more of like you can bring any suit that's garbage and it will get thrown out and like it will get thrown out and that'll be the worst thing that happens to you, and the person who you sue will have to go through all of the pain and like hardship of defending it. You probably won't even, if you're the person, even if it's a bullshit suit, you probably won't even get attorney's fees for having to defend it for it, you know? So like my point is for this is like, no, this is just not something the Bar Association is going to do. This is something that people are trying to seek relief from the courts for. They're going to get smacked down. It's just completely within their rights. And it's just stupid for the person who are signing their name onto these petitions because they're going to live forever, and it's stupid that it's like it's a waste of time and it's not going to look good for them reputationally. But besides that, there's very little that the Bar Association has to say about like these types of things. It's much more concerned with steals your client's money, promises returns to a client that you can't ever like make good on type of thing, which happens with so much more frequency. Sadly.
The Michael Abbiati kind of stuff.
Yeah,
oh my God! Yes, exactly.
And the and also the routine cheating of a client, the abandonment of a client, the sort of mistreatment of a client,
sleeping with a client's
sleeping with clients.
So clients
that bars get upset about that.
My dad was on the committee that disbarred somebody who like the attorney for the wife had ended up was doing their will, like, and the attorney ended up having an affair with the wife, and the wife divorced her husband and the attorney ended up going and representing the husband even though he was actively sleeping with his client's wife, if that makes sense to you. That was that you'll get disbarred for pretty quickly.
But there is I think one, and there's a couple of wrinkles to, I agree completely with what Kate just said. There are a couple of little wrinkles that complicate it a little bit. In the case of state AGs, most bars would take the view, hey, this is not an ethical issue. It's an issue between them and their elected constituents, right? It's like, they're obliged zealously to represent. Remember, the lawyer has affirmative obligations here too, and including the obligation to defend the interests of the client zealously. And of course, in this case, they're the people who decide what the interests. They are the client as well as the lawyer in some ways. So most bars would take the view that an outrageous position taken by a state AG is an electoral matter. There's one important caveat here, though, which is that if the courts were to say this is outrageous, this is garbage, and were to sanction lawyers and refer it to the bar, then the bar would regard it as they take stuff very seriously when it comes from the courts.
Yeah.
So I think, but so far we haven't seen that. Now, I haven't talked to Mark Elias about this, but if I were Mark Elias, I would wait until the day after Joe Biden were inaugurated and then file sanctions motions against a bunch of these people if I thought it was in the client's interest to do that. But I wouldn't do that. You don't want to do that until after you've accomplished the primary objective.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, David Botts, you get the last question today.
All right. Thanks so much. I do have presents for both of you. Oops.
Ooh.
We can't see it.
Oh, let's we can fix that.
Make him big. Ooh.
Oh, yes.
Is that a ranunculus?
It is a ranunculus. That was the Good Morning image.
Oh, was
this
it?
morning.
Do you like ranunculi?
And we've got the fox that Matt
the...
Tate and I were talking about should be the anchor on Fox News.
Wait, do you guys know Pearson v. Post? Like the why I retweeted that image? Like, do you know about the kind of the landmark case that every 1L student learns about the fox? Do you ever heard this?
No, because I've never been a 1L.
Okay, I'll tell it as quickly as possible, but I teach this case. It's like basically it's like the canonical case. It is like a bunch of people in like, oh God, I'm going to screw up the details of it because I haven't taught it in a year. But basically a bunch of people hunting a fox in the wilds of what is now the Hamptons in Long Island, but it was the wilds of Long Island at this point. And they chase it off of their land and onto the beach, and they have wounded it in some way, or they've like not wounded it. It's unclear. And another person comes along and grabs the fox on the beach, which is public property. And then they sue Pearson sues Post in like court, in early court in New York. And this is like, I think like the early 1800s, basically for the fox. And about whether or not like a fox, a wild animal can be somebody's property, and at what point a wild animal in a hunt suddenly becomes somebody's personal property. Like, do you have to just be pursuing it? And actually this is related, I teach it alongside, sorry David, you're always like have to sit here while we talk, but I teach this alongside a case that happened, the Barry Bonds home run ball, in which he broke the home run record, and it
fraudulently.
Yes, of course, but the ball was in the San Francisco. It's a very famous it's actually a famous court case now. But the ball was caught by one person, it was caught on video too. It bounced out of the webbing of his glove, and then there was a scrum, and one other guy picked it up out of the scrum and got the ball. And the guy who originally had the ball, but it was knocked out of his glove, sued the guy who ended up with the ball for the ball. And anyways, it just was ended up being, it was the same thing as the fox. I teach this about possessory interest and about when possession begins, when it doesn't, how it's all a very soft line depending on context and all of these things. And so we do this whole ancient fox case, and then we do it a modern one with a baseball, and it's very fun, and I don't know. Anyways, this is why I love property law, and that's why I was excited about a wild fox running around the White House.
Well, no, I really appreciate this, and I think that fundamentally this simply proves your hypothesis, Professor Klonick, that all law is property law, and that all of us should celebrate property law every day of our lives.
Yes,
you can tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
That is my big lesson. That is I just, yeah.
All right.
All right. You get the last question, David.
Okay. So question, what is going on with the Wall Street Journal opinion editor that they publish what could be arguably extremely misogynist argument saying, or an attack on Dr. Jill Biden, where the opinion writer really gives her a hard time for using her title. And I say this to a person who is both a lawyer and a PhD.
Yeah, that's a weird.
what's up. But I think probably this happens to females more often than males. I think.
I saw that and I had mixed feelings about it because I don't like, so I'm going to tell a weird story. So when I was, my first job ever, I was 17 years old and I was a hostess at a very fancy restaurant. I was not great at this job.
In Rochester?
Yeah, as you might imagine. It
I
was
didn't know there were fancy restaurants.
Oh,
in
shut
Rochester.
up! It's a very nice place. It actually was an old brothel turned into a very fancy restaurant that was right along the Erie Canal because, there used to be shipping, and so brothels were much more popular than fancy restaurants. But anyway, I digress. People used to women used to call the to make a reservation, and I'd ask for the name, and they would say Dr. and Mrs. And it would always be like whatever it was, there was something about that always just seemed, I had never been able, I didn't eat at this restaurant growing up. I wasn't allowed, we would never, my parents would go there once a year for their anniversary type of thing. And it just seemed so pretentious to me. And I was very I was just I hate titles. Titles are stupid, type of thing. And I always thought that I would hate titles, and I don't love them. I still don't like being called Professor Klonick or Doctor whatever. But on behalf of people who really, they're really important to, I feel like it undermines other people to cast your title aside. Does that make any sense? If you can be I don't know. There's just I do think that a lot of women kind of, people don't pay attention to their titles, or they'll just call them by their first name or whatever. Or that men get a lot of credit for seeming very human by just being oh, don't call me doctor, I'm just so-and-so. Whereas it's just assumed with women. So I don't know. I saw that with Jill Biden. I just thought it was stupid. I don't know. I just think that honestly, I think that she should be called professor. She's a teacher. She regular professor. When you get a PhD, technically, it's much more prestigious to be called professor, because that's the harder part, is to get an actual fucking job with your PhD than it is to even get the PhD to begin with. So calling someone doctor who has attained a professorship is actually kind of weirdly, you don't do that typically. A person has a professor title on a tenure track thing, you call them professor, not doctor. So I don't know, but this is all just kind of I have mixed feelings about it. What do you think, Ben?
I have no mixed feelings about it. I thought it was an outrageous piece, and I thought the use of the phrase kiddo in the first sentence of it was kind of the giveaway that there was no good faith element of this. It was just an effort to be demeaning in a highly,
the article is terrible
in a highly sexist fashion. And I actually read it because my Twitter feed exploded this morning with people's anger, and I often read things under those circumstances in order to find that I am less outraged than the reaction. And in this case, I was like, holy shit, it's really bad.
Oh, I should have been clear that I hated this op-ed. No, I thought that the op-ed was dripping with sexism. I'm just talking about in general. I think titles are awkward, and
I think it's fine to object to titles, and it's fine to defend titles. And I'm also I think I usually get uncomfortable when people call me Mr. Wittes, and I prefer to be called by my first name, and
I'll call you Dr. Wittes from now on.
Yeah, you can call me Doofus. And so I totally understand the debate, but if you're singling out Jill Biden to, having never expressed this concern about Seb Gorka or Henry Kissinger, right? If you're singling out Jill Biden to have this debate because, let's face it, she's a girl and she's in a girly field, right? She's got a doctorate in education.
She cares about teaching people.
She cares about teaching people, right?
Children.
And so it's and so you're gonna wage this war with reference to her and her alone. I don't know, call me a radical lefty feminist, but I'm kind of with the sisterhood on this. It's pretty offensive.
I'll call you a radical lefty feminist.
Yeah, that's me. All right. We're 10 minutes over already, and we got to go. Kate, who's our mystery guest for tomorrow? Okay. Our mystery guest is the bird. That will be 22 hours and 50 minutes from now, and I will badger Kate to see if we can get her to reveal the answer before then. And until then, we don't have fun anymore, but we do have a bleeding pineapple.
Does that whole room just stink of pineapple right now?
No.
You don't even notice it anymore.
I don't know. It's so saturated. All right. We will see you tomorrow.
Bye, friends. It was great to hang out with you. See you